Hello everyone and welcome back to Send It's Weather channel. Today we're going to be taking out the latest data from the main models, the Icon, the GFS, the GEM and the ECMWF, so a fair share of American and European models, and to take a look at the general trend over the next 10 days to in the longer term, which will lead us up to February. So to start with, we're just going to start with the current trend at the moment. So from the outset, we have high pressure beginning to reintroduce itself over the top of the country, bringing in the winds from a very mild southwesterly for Scotland. However, parts of the southeast and central Britain, as well as possibly the southwest, are seeing still a little bit of cold lingering before next week when it gets swept away, as the icon shows here very well, by the whole country being embarking in these very mild southerly winds, southwesterly winds. The surface temperatures, as you'll see here, are not going to be ridiculously high, but they are going to be a lot higher than they have been recently, where some areas have not risen above freezing. So any lying snow on the ground will definitely be swept away or be washed away by milder conditions returning. Now, as you'll see from this icon run, as we carry on through the rest of this week, many areas are fairly dry, probably quite mild and quite sunny as well under that high pressure. In the longer term, around the 20th is where things start to change a little bit with a lot of these runs, as the Atlantic starts to try and bring in more unsettled weather. Low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, though still bringing in the wind from the west or southwest with the icon, and that's as far as we get out with, bringing in some relatively mild air for that at that point. I didn't mean to show that. This is the ECM probability forecast for anyone wondering. So this basically shows the pattern. So blocking, positive NAO is high pressure to the south, low pressure to the north, winds in from the west. So a typical pattern. Blocking is high pressure either in the Atlantic or towards Greenland, bringing in cold, or allowing the chance of colder winds. Negative NAO is literally that pattern. So high pressure to the north somewhere and low pressure to the south. As you can see, as we go through into this week, if you watch my live stream, which you should have done, joking, then we did see that all of this was kind of high pressure to the south, low pressure to the north, westerly pattern. However, the pattern is not as strongly supported now. Towards the middle to end of the month and beyond, there is actually a little bit of a stronger signal for blocking. But the Atlantic flow is still evident there, and probably is still the most favoured, but it's something to watch out for in the longer term. Now, let's go back to the wetter, and let's have a look at the GFS, the American 12Z model, which has just finished coming out. Very similar pattern for the next few days. Whoops, I did not mean to click back. Similar pattern for the next few days. Southwesterly is turning to a southerly wind as low pressure begins to break through from the Atlantic around Monday next week, which brings southerly winds, very mild southerly winds. Keeps the Atlantic onslaught going, really, until around day 10, where heights try to build to our northeast, towards Scandinavia. Actually quite an interesting pattern with a few of these runs. This is the main reason I made this video. Some of the runs, especially now with these deterministic models, are trying to build heights or raise heights towards Scandinavia, which could allow for some colder air to sink our way. As you can see to our east, there is quite a cold pool of air being shown by the GFS, the American model, and if the winds do switch direction and the Atlantic onslaught doesn't break it down, then things could be pretty interesting. As it stands with the GFS, though, it keeps the Atlantic onslaught going with relatively average air masses kind of moving through. So kind of an oscillation between milder and cooler air masses as we go into the longer term until running up to the end of the month. But the uncertainty does begin around the 24th, 25th of Jan. That is something to watch out for, though, and you'll see in a minute with what the other runs are showing. You can see where the cold air is going. It's going straight into Norway. We're very close to bringing in some colder air, but the Atlantic is far too powerful to cause anything to happen. But with this, the polar vortex is being displaced from its roots of Greenland and Iceland and is shifting southwards, so it is something definitely to watch out for. But as you've seen in the long range, it goes pretty mild, wet and windy. That's always the risk with these sort of patterns. But it's so far out, I won't worry about it, but it's something to watch out for, at least. At least for the next week anyway, if you've hated the cold weather, then you should enjoy the dry, mild, and probably quite sunny weather. Maybe the highest risk of fog in the south and the east, possibly an inversion, because it's not going to be exactly predominantly mild. See, the upper temperatures are quite mild, but temperatures at the surface could struggle to get much above 5, 6, 7 degrees. But it's something to watch out for. If we have a look at the GEM by comparison, again, very similar for the next few days, with high pressure to, over and just to the south of the country, bringing in winds from the southwest. In the longer term, though, develops this low pressure again in the Atlantic, but much less strong. Much weaker than the GFS does. And as you can see, there is a bit more of an opening between Greenland and Scandinavia, which does allow colder winds to be a bit further towards us in that respect. So it's kind of a battleground scenario between the high pressure over and just to the north of the country and low pressure trying to barrage in from off the Atlantic. So it's a very messy pattern. So it's kind of a northeast southwest split there, as you can see there. So the cold winds of from the northeast have migrated into northern England and Scotland, whereas the central and southern and southwestern regions are still under a relatively mild air mass. Something to watch out for. The ECMWF then, we'll have a look at the mid-night run because the 12Z hasn't come out yet. However, it does show a very similar pattern, just a little bit more Atlantic driven, winds in from the west, southwest the whole time, and again trying to build heights towards Scandinavia. It doesn't successfully because the Atlantic is just so much more powerful. Look at all this stormy weather moving in, really spinning up these lows in the Atlantic, which topples this high pressure trying to bridge out to our west. Now, as you can see here, it's very mild for the whole run. So the ECM is, and as well for next weekend, is bringing in some very mild air masses. Look at the 10 to 12 degrees above average moving in. That would definitely allow the temperatures possibly in Scotland to reach the mid-teens there, actually, which is quite a contrast from minus 20 in Altnahara we've had over the last week. But it's definitely something that can happen. Probably might happen, but there is definitely the risk there of colder conditions possibly returning for the last week of Jan. Just something to watch out for, though. If we have a look at the ensembles, I've just brought up Birmingham's. This is every single run of the GFS ensembles, of the GFS brought into an ensemble run. As you can see, we're going above average now for the next week, from the 13th to the 19th. Then in the longer term, there is a bit more scatter around the 20th, 21st, where there's potential for like a colder snap or like a ridge. But in the longer term, there's a definite trend towards a colder spell, possibly. Well, I'd say possibly below average temperatures or unsettled weather returning. Albeit there is a lot of scatter with some milder runs and colder runs in the mix. What I would say at this stage is it's something to watch out for. We'll keep monitoring it. But I just wanted to make a quick video on the longer range prospects. So if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. And yeah, it's just I'll see you all in the next one. And there you go. So enjoy the rest of your evening and your weekend, and have a good week.